The man who took their lives gave an interview to a local newspaper the very next morning. He told the reporter they were the nicest people in the world. He said he had never seen a couple get along better than they did. He said it with a straight face, in print. While the tragedy at that house was still actively unfolding, most people assume cold cases go unsolved because there are no witnesses. This one stayed unresolved for 24 years, even though one person knew the complete truth from day one and chose every single day to stay silent. This case would prove something most of us don't want to believe: the most dangerous secrets are not buried in the ground. They live inside a marriage. They get whispered as a threat inside a quiet house. They get repeated as a lie to investigators year after year after year for a quarter of a century. His name was Rick Lee Brink, born December 10, 1958 in Holland, Michigan. He trained carpenters for a living. His coworkers described him the same way every time: dependable, reliable, the kind of man who showed up and followed through. The day he met Gail Weingarten, he went home and told his mother, "I just met the woman I'm going to marry." He meant it. He wasn't the kind of man who said things he didn't mean. Her name was Gail Marie Weingarten, born April 24, 1965, one of 8 children. The family didn't have much money, but they had each other, and Gail never used the first as an excuse. From a young age, she told her older sister Cheryl she would work as hard as it took to never depend on anyone. She got her first job waitressing as a teenager. The pay wasn't much, but the tips were excellent, because customers didn't just come back for the food, they came back for her. Her laughter was the kind people remembered long after the conversation ended. They met at work in 1984. He was 25, she was 19. Within days, she ended a previous relationship to be with him. Within a year, they were inseparable. Rick's friend Bill Whedon later called Gail liquid sunshine, the kind of person who lit up a room the moment she entered it. Rick spoiled her. She let him. She loved him back just as completely, and everyone around them could see it. April 25, 1986, one day after Gail's 21st birthday, they married in a small church. Simple ceremony. The people who loved them filled every pew. The reception was at a lakefront club, and they danced until the lights came on. Then they left for a honeymoon cruise. Came home sunburned and happy and ready to build everything they had talked about. They found a house on Ransom Street in Park Township, 20 acres, a fixer-upper, priced low because the previous owner had lost it to the bank. Rick was a skilled tradesman. He wasn't afraid of the work. He got his hands in it immediately, and he filmed it. Room by room, he carried a camcorder through that half-finished house. Paint cans on the floor, walls stripped back to the studs, cabinets not yet hung, and in nearly every frame there was Gail covered in renovation dust, laughing at something off camera, turning toward the lens and waving. That footage still exists. 6 weeks after it was recorded, Gail was gone. By November 1987, 18 months into their marriage, Gail called Cheryl with news. The next room they planned to renovate was going to be a nursery. They were ready for children, ready to fill that house with exactly the life they had been building toward. From the outside, this was the picture of a couple that had everything figured out. The kind of happiness that looks, from a distance, absolutely unbreakable. Saturday, November 21st, 1987. Rick and Gail attended a friend's wedding at the Holiday Inn. Rick had a few drinks. Gail got a little tipsy. They left together around 11 p.m., heading home. That was the last time anyone outside that house saw them alive. Monday morning, November 23. Rick didn't show up to work at Trenway, the furniture company where he trained carpenters. His employer knew immediately something was wrong. Rick had never missed a day without calling. He reached out to Rick's parents, Garrett and Ida Brink. They said they would go check on him. They drove out to Ransom Street. Rick's Chevrolet Blazer was parked in the driveway, which meant he had to be home. Garrett walked up to the car. Rick was inside, completely unresponsive in the front seat. Realizing the gravity of what she was seeing from a distance, Ida nearly collapsed. Garrett held her up, walked her slowly back to their car, made sure she was seated, and then turned around and walked back inside the house alone to find Gail. In the master bedroom, Gail was on their waterbed. A pillow covered her face. When officers lifted it, the grim reality became clear. She had been targeted while she slept, leaving her no opportunity to defend herself or cry out. Police secured the scene and began documenting everything. What they found and what they didn't find told them exactly what kind of attack this was. Nearly $500 in cash sat untouched throughout the house. Gail's purse was on the kitchen counter, both wallets still full, credit cards are still inside, both victims were still wearing their wedding rings, no forced entry anywhere, no sign of a struggle in any room, no weapon, no shell casings. The person responsible had taken the time to clean the scene completely before leaving. There was no panic, no rush, no desperation at all. This was cold, deliberate, and deeply, unmistakably personal. One forensic detail stood quietly above everything else. The pillow covering Gail's face was not from the bedroom. It came from the living room. There were no injuries through it, which meant it was placed there only after the attack was already over. Placed there by someone who could not bring themselves to look at what they had just done. Someone who knew her, someone who felt something, and chose to hide it rather than face it. Police had a clean crime scene, no suspects, no motive, no weapon, and almost nothing to guide them forward. And then, in the middle of all that chaos, Gail's own brother stepped forward and spoke to the Holland Sentinel. He was the first family member to face the cameras, the first to shape the narrative. Looking back at his words today, they carry a meaning that is almost impossible to read without feeling cold. He was the one who knew exactly what had happened inside that house, and he was the one doing the talking. The first person detectives looked at was the man Gail had left before she met Rick. His name was Lars. They had been serious, lived together, built a house together, spent about a year as a couple before Gail walked away. The breakup was not peaceful. When she came to collect her things, a physical confrontation occurred, leaving Gail visibly shaken. Her older brother Ryan heard about the incident, confronted Lars directly at his door, and made one thing very clear: "Don't you ever touch my sister again." Lars backed down immediately. Hold on to that image. An older brother defending his little sister. It will look completely different by the end of this story. Lars had never fully moved on from Gail. He admitted that to detectives without being pushed. He also admitted something that raised immediate concern. He had driven past the house on Ransom Street more than once. Not for any specific reason, just because he couldn't stop thinking about her. That kind of admission puts a person at the top of a list very quickly. Then, investigators found something that moved him even higher. The same Saturday night, Rick and Gail attended a wedding reception. Lars was at Calypso's, the bar that the entire wedding party moved to after the ceremony. Same building, same night, possibly the same hour. Lars said he remembered seeing people dressed formally when he arrived, but claimed he had no idea Gail was among them. Detectives sat him down for a polygraph. He passed without difficulty. His alibi held up when checked independently. Lars was cleared and removed from the investigation. The first door closed. Before investigators could regroup, someone walked into the police station on their own. No call ahead, no lawyer. Just a man who believed he was the reason two people were dead. His name was Sid Cobby. Most people in Holland knew him as Shotgun Sid. Sid had been a member of the Road Knights, a biker group with direct connections to drug trafficking networks running out of Detroit. He had eventually turned federal informant, troubled by what he was seeing, specifically illegal substances being pushed to high school students in the area. Becoming an informant in that world has consequences. Sid had been targeted multiple times. On at least 2 occasions, people had shown up at Ransom Street, the same house Rick and Gail now called home, specifically looking for him. He had confronted them and driven them off. What he believed was this: those same people had finally sent someone to settle the score, not knowing he no longer lived there. Rick and Gail, in his theory, had simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time, inside a house with the wrong history. Detectives took it seriously. Informants were placed inside the motorcycle network. 2 names came back, a man called Ghetto Rat and another known only as Grizz. Within 1 week of the events on Ransom Street, Grizz's life came to a sudden and dark end in Detroit. The timing landed like a stone in still water. Investigators moved quickly to reach Ghetto Rat before the trail went cold. He sat down with them and said, "If our group had done this, I would have been there. It didn't happen." Detectives pressed every angle they had. No physical evidence tied the gang to Ransom Street. No witness placed anyone from that network near the house. The second door closed. 33 days after Rick and Gail were found, Christmas Eve, December 24th, 1987, something happened that changed the emotional temperature of the entire investigation. A husband came home from a work party in the early hours of the morning. Every light in his house was on. The rear sliding door that led to the backyard was wide open. His wife, 30-year-old Deborah Wilson, was gone. He called his father. They searched the property together. In the field behind the house, they found her. She had been severely and fatally targeted in a manner that sent shockwaves through the local community. Deborah Wilson had attended the same high school as Rick Brink. Her house was less than 800 meters from Ransom Street, close enough to reach on foot in under 10 minutes if you cut across the fields between them. And then someone pulled a file from 1977. Deborah Polinsky, 20 years old, became a victim in an upstairs bedroom less than half a mile from where Gail and Rick had lived. 3 violent cases, 3 women and 1 man, all within walking distance of each other, all unsolved, all within the same quiet corner of Ottawa County. The word spread through Holland the way fear always does, quietly at first, then all at once. People who had never locked their doors began locking them. Parents stopped letting children walk home after dark. A petition circulated demanding more police presence on residential streets. The working theory, the one nobody said out loud, but everyone was thinking, was that there was someone in this community who had been doing this for years. Someone local, someone familiar, someone who might be a neighbor. Investigators worked on every connection between the 3 cases. They found none. Different methods, different motives, no shared suspects, no overlapping evidence, 3 separate perpetrators. 3 separate tragedies that had happened to cluster in the same small geography through nothing more than terrible coincidence. The serial predator theory collapsed, and with it went the last real momentum the investigation had. Lead detective Lauren Wasing stayed on the Brink case for 8 years. 8 years of following threads that went nowhere, re-interviewing witnesses who had nothing new to offer, sitting across from Rick's parents and Gail's family and telling them, again, that there was nothing new to report. He retired in 1995 after 31 years on the force. He didn't want to go. He later said the Brink case was the one that weighed on him, the greatest of all of them. He walked out of that building not knowing whether the person responsible would ever be held accountable. The file went into a box. The box went on a shelf. A quarter-century passed. Rick's mother, Ida, gave one interview during those years that said everything. She told a reporter, "You're thinking all the time, is that person around here? Does he look us in the face and know what he did to our son?" In 2009, the Ottawa County Sheriff's Department formed a dedicated cold case unit, 2 detectives, 1 assignment, no deadline. They were given a room full of boxes. They started pulling files. Some of the paperwork had been sitting so long it had begun to fall apart. Pages torn in half, edges crumbled. The detectives taped them back together before they could even read them, carefully, slowly. Like people who understood that the answers were still in there somewhere, just waiting for someone patient enough to look. What they found inside those fragile, crumbling pages would unravel everything. Inside one of those old boxes, buried under 20-plus years of dust, was a single answer that nobody had ever bothered to chase. Detectives Venus Repper and David Blakely had been assigned to the Brink case in 2011. They were not from Holland. They had no history with the families, no old opinions about what happened, no reason to protect any version of the story. They came in with nothing except the files, and the files were barely holding together. Some pages had torn completely in half. Others crumbled at the edges the moment they were touched. The detectives taped them back together before they could read them, carefully, 1 page at a time. 2 investigators sitting at a table, piecing together the broken fragments of someone else's story, trying to give it an ending it was never allowed to have. Detective Repper described their strategy simply: loyalties change, friendships change. People who were hiding a secret back then no longer feel the need, or they've held it so long they want to put it down. They conducted more than 200 interviews. They crossed state lines to reach witnesses who had moved away. They reread every single statement from 1987. And slowly across those hundreds of conversations, a pattern began to form that nobody had caught the first time around. Multiple family members interviewed separately on different days with no contact between them reported the same thing. 3 days after Rick and Gail were found, Gail's older brother Ryan was gathered with family when he said something that nobody fully processed at the time. He began describing completely unprompted a scene from inside the Brink house. He said he could picture exactly what happened. He described a figure walking down the long hallway, seeing Gail lying in bed, watching her turn onto her left side. The figure leans down and says to her, "I'll be right back." He narrated it as though he had been standing there watching it unfold with his own eyes. And then he said, "You know, sometimes I wonder if I could have done this." His family heard a man in shock, a grieving brother processing something too large to understand. They heard the clumsy, painful words of someone trying to make sense of a tragedy. What they were actually hearing was something else entirely, and they would not understand that until much later. Repper pulled Ryan's original 1987 interview file. He had been questioned within days of the attack. Standard procedure, everyone close to the victims was interviewed early. Ryan was never treated as a suspect. His alibi was straightforward. He and his girlfriend, Pam Marachini, had spent the evening doing laundry at a local laundromat, then finished up at a friend's house where they also babysat her children. Pam had confirmed the alibi. Ryan was cleared without further question. But Repper kept reading. Pam had given two separate statements during the original investigation. In the first, she confirmed the alibi. In the second, she agreed to sit for a polygraph examination. The examiner asked her one direct question. "Were you with Ryan for the entire night of November 21st? Pam answered, "No." That answer was written down, documented, filed, and then for 24 years, not a single investigator followed up on it. Not one. It sat there in black and white, in a crumbling folder, in a box, on a shelf, in a storage room, waiting for someone who was paying close enough attention to find it. Repper and Blakely drove to Ryan and Pam's home to re-interview them both. By this point, they had been married for 23 years. 3 children together. Ryan stayed home. Pam worked full-time and was the sole financial support for a household of 6. Ryan was the one who answered the door. He said Pam wasn't home. He said he didn't remember much from 1987. It was too long ago. He agreed to have Pam come to the station separately. Then, the moment that appointment was arranged, Ryan announced he would be sitting in on her interview. The detectives told him that was not how it worked. He would wait outside. That reaction, the immediate, instinctive need to be in the room, was the first thing the detectives filed away. While reviewing Ryan's background from 1987, they discovered he had been involved with 2 women at the same time. Pam was one. They had only recently started dating when the attack happened. The other was a woman named Crystal Villain, a previous girlfriend of several years. The relationship had ended, but the two had remained in loose contact. Detectives tracked Crystal down and brought her in. The interview went nowhere for nearly an hour. Standard questions, nothing new. The detectives began wrapping up. They were already standing, coats in hand, when Crystal said, "Well, there is actually one other thing." They sat back down. She told them that in the week following the attack on Rick and Gail, Ryan had come to her. He wanted to drive past the house on Ransom Street, said he needed to see it. Crystal refused. She couldn't bear the thought of going anywhere near that place. So instead, they drove to a park on the north side of Holland and parked. Ryan was crying. He said he had something terrible he needed to tell someone, and then he told her. He spoke of an inappropriate and deeply troubling dynamic with Gail when they were children. He claimed it was a shared secret, but admitted that eventually a definitive line was crossed against her will, and he chose to ignore her boundaries entirely. Then Ryan reached into something and pulled out a photograph. It was taken on a family boat trip, Gail in a swimsuit, out on the water with Rick and Ryan. Ryan held the photo toward Crystal, fixating heavily on Gail's appearance from that trip. He admitted to Crystal that his intense focus on her during that family outing had crossed a line, so much so that it drew immediate attention. Crystal had carried that conversation for years without knowing what to do with it. Now she was sitting across from 2 cold case detectives. And they were writing down every word. Repper and Blakely now had something they hadn't had before. A motive. Ryan had been living with a hidden past that threatened to unravel his entire existence. As Gail built a real life, a confident, settled, deeply loved life with Rick, the risk that she would finally speak the truth had been growing, and Rick had already seen enough on that boat to start asking questions. But a motive is not a conviction. There was still no weapon, no forensic evidence, no physical proof of any kind connecting Ryan to that house on the night of November 21st. To take this case to a jury, they needed someone who had direct knowledge, not from years later, not secondhand, but from the morning after. Someone who had been told exactly what happened by the person who did it. As it turned out, that person had been living with Ryan Wingardin for over 2 decades. Pam Wingardin walked into the sheriff's department that day with her husband standing right behind her. That detail matters. Ryan had insisted on accompanying her. He wanted to be in the building. He wanted to be close to the room. And the moment the detectives told him he would not be sitting inside that interview, The moment that door closed between them, his composure began to slip in a way that would keep slipping for a long time. Pam sat across from Repper and Blakely. For nearly 3 hours, she gave them almost nothing. The same alibi she had maintained for over 2 decades. Laundromat, home, together all night. She was composed, controlled, and clearly holding something back that she had no intention of releasing. Not today, not yet. Then slowly, something gave way. She told them the alibi was false, not everything, just that one piece. She confirmed they had gone to the laundromat that evening and were home by around 8 p.m., then Ryan left. She didn't ask where he was going. She assumed he was involved in illicit transactions to cover their bills, as he had been struggling financially. He came back once, briefly, then left again, and didn't return until 9 o'clock the following morning. That was all she gave them. She said nothing about what Ryan said when he came back. Nothing about where he took her, nothing about what he showed her. She was still protecting him, but a piece of the wall had come down, and the detectives knew it. Ryan was brought in immediately after. The detectives told him Pam had confirmed his alibi was false. He didn't move. "She's confused," he said. "That's not what happened." He would not give an inch on anything. Then Detective Blakely shifted the conversation entirely. Not on the night of November 21st. Not to the attack. He asked Ryan about his relationship with Gail, just that, nothing more specific. Ryan looked at him. The room went quiet. 40 seconds passed without a word. 40 seconds is a long time when two people are sitting across a table staring at each other. Then Ryan said very quietly, "It was just kids' play. Nothing else." 4 words and then silence again. Blakely didn't push. He noted it, filed it away, and let the moment sit. Its full weight would land somewhere else, in a different room, in front of a different audience, much later. Both were released. Ryan went home, and then the voicemail started. More than 30 of them, all directed to Detective Blakely's office phone over the days that followed. Ryan left message after message, insulting the detectives with language that would make most people hang up, while in the same breath calling them a necessary evil. In one message he said, "Hey, this is Ryan Weingarten. I don't know why I'm calling you again. I guess because I hate you and appreciate you at the same time." In others, he demanded they find the real person responsible. He accused them of digging up childhood indiscretions that had nothing to do with the case. He called Pam's admission coerced. He said they had bullied her into changing her story. He was unraveling. Not all at once, but steadily, and the detectives could hear it happening in real time, one voicemail at a time. Meanwhile, something significant was happening that the public had no knowledge of. Detective Dave Blakely was approaching retirement. He had made a personal promise to himself years earlier. He would not leave this job until the Brink case was resolved. He had told colleagues this. He had meant it. This was his final case. The window was not just closing on justice for Rick and Gail, it was closing on the man who had quietly made their case his life's work. He and Repper agreed. They had one more real chance with Pam. They needed to reach her when Ryan wasn't there. When there was no one watching the door, no one waiting in the hallway, no one reminding her, silently, simply by being present, what the consequences of telling the truth looked like. January 18, 2013. Repper and Blakely went to Pam's workplace without calling ahead. They simply showed up and found her. They told her directly, "We are not going away. This is the only kind of case we work. We have no other assignment, and the only thing we want is the truth for two people who deserved far better than what happened to them." Pam agreed to speak. A human resources representative was offered to sit in on the conversation. Pam looked at them and asked them to leave the room. She didn't want anyone from her workplace to hear what she was about to say. Then she said it, all of it, Sunday morning, November 22nd, 1987, 9 o'clock. Ryan came to her apartment door, visibly shaking and distressed. Before she could say anything, he confessed to what had happened to Gail and Rick. Pam had known Ryan for only a few months at that point. She was a single mother with a 6-month-old son. Ryan had been kind to both of them, attentive, present, everything a struggling young mother could have hoped someone might be. And now he was standing in her doorway telling her he had just ended 2 people's lives. She asked if he had contacted the police. He said no. She told him to leave. He did, but hours later, he called and asked me to come back. She said yes. She didn't know what else to do. He arrived, picked her up, and put her and her infant son in the car. She assumed they were going to his apartment. Instead, he drove to Ransom Street. He stopped the car beside Rick's Chevrolet Blazer and told her to look inside. Then he grabbed her wrist and walked her into the house. Down the hallway, into the master bedroom. Gail was there. Ryan stood over the scene, forcing Pam to witness the outcome of his actions while making an unsettlingly detached remark about Gail. Then he turned to Pam, issuing a stark ultimatum. He made it clear that if she went to the authorities, neither she nor her infant son would ever be safe again. Pam ran back to the car. She did not scream. She did not knock on a neighbor's door or call out for help. She sat in the passenger seat with her baby and waited for Ryan to come out. The next morning, he displayed the evidence of his actions, along with the clothing from that night, before loading everything into his vehicle to ensure it would never be found. On the drive to drop her off at home, he built the alibi, detailed, specific, easy to remember. He made her repeat it back to him. And then he said, simply, if the story stays straight, everything stays safe. He didn't need to explain what not safe looked like. She had already seen it. She attended Gail and Rick's funeral that week, standing beside the family, holding their grief. Knowing everything, she married Ryan the following year, had 3 more children with him, worked full-time to support all 6 of them while Ryan stayed home, and every so often in the years that followed, he reminded her, keep the story straight. She had kept it for 26 years. Then she sat in a room at her workplace, asked a human resources representative to leave, and put it down. Within hours of Pam's confession, Ryan Wingardin was arrested. But an arrest is not a conviction. There was no weapon. It had never been found. There was no forensic evidence linking Ryan to that house on the night of November 21st. Not a fingerprint. Not a fiber. Nothing. The prosecution was going to walk into a courtroom carrying a wife's testimony, a set of circumstantial details, and a story that had been buried for 26 years. Ryan Wingardin was going to fight every single word of it, and he was going to make sure everyone in that courtroom knew exactly how he felt about being there. After Ryan's arrest, a detail came forward that reframed the entire timeline in a way nobody had expected. One of Gail's co-workers at the auto parts company reached out to investigators. She had worked alongside Gail for years. She knew her well enough to notice when something changed. About 2 weeks before the attack, roughly 2 weeks before that Saturday night, Gail had gone quiet. Not sad, not visibly upset, just different. The warmth that she carried into every room had dimmed slightly. She seemed burdened, like something was sitting on her that she couldn't put down or talk about. The coworker had noticed it at the time but hadn't understood it. Now, with everything the investigation had uncovered, only one explanation fit. Gail had sensed something coming. She couldn't name it. She couldn't prove it. But something in her knew. She just didn't know what to do with that feeling, and she never got the chance to act on it. While Ryan sat in the Ottawa County Jail waiting for the trial to begin, he wrote letters, 29 of them. Every single one was addressed to Pam. Some of the letters begged her to take back her statement, told her she was confused, that the detectives had manipulated her, that she didn't understand what she was doing. Some letters contained ominous warnings about the consequences of her testimony, shifting between pleading and hostility. And then there was one letter that stood apart from all the others. In it, Ryan told Pam she was only testifying against him because she wanted movie rights. His theory: if the story became a film, Pam would be the hero. Pam would get the credit. Pam would walk away with something while he sat in a cell. 29 letters, 29 different angles. Every one of them had a strategy built by a man who had spent his entire adult life managing the story around him and was watching that skill fail in real time. Pam read every letter. Then she filed for divorce. March 2014. Trial began at the Ottawa County Circuit Court in Grand Haven, Michigan. Judge John Holsing presiding. 3 weeks. More than 60 witnesses. The courtroom filled every morning with family members, journalists, and people from Holland who had followed this case for over 2 decades, waiting for a day they had nearly stopped believing would come. Gail's sister, Cheryl Murphy, took the stand. So did Lynn, another sibling, their aunt. Crystal Villan testified with precise, steady detail about the park, the photograph, and every word Ryan had spoken to her while crying in the days after the attack. Each witness added a layer. Each layer made the picture clearer. And then Jim Meacham took the stand. Jim had been Ryan's childhood friend. They had grown up together, stayed close into adulthood, and Jim had briefly been Ryan's employer at a tree trimming operation before they settled back into just being friends. He testified about the morning of Monday, November 23, 1987. He had stopped by Ryan's apartment early, the way he often did before heading to work for coffee. Ryan and Pam were both there. Both were visibly distressed. Ryan told Jim that morning, "My sister's been taken from us." Rick and Gail's remains weren't officially discovered until later that same morning when Rick's employer contacted his parents and they drove to Ransom Street. The news didn't reach the broader family until that afternoon. Jim Meacham had been told hours before anyone outside that house could have known. The only explanation for that was the one nobody wanted to say out loud in 1987, but everyone understood perfectly in that courtroom in 2014. Pam took the stand. She sat down without looking at Ryan. She had protected him for 26 years. She had built a life around keeping his secret. Now she sat in a courtroom and told a jury everything: the Sunday morning confession, the drive to Ransom Street, the hallway, the bedroom, the threat that included her infant son. She described what daily life with Ryan had actually looked like from the inside. He had not allowed her to maintain friendships of her own. He called her at work every single day, not to check in, but to monitor her. He controlled every financial decision the household made. He homeschooled their children against her wishes, deciding what they were exposed to and what they were kept from. She explained to the jury why she had stayed as long as she did. Her father had been emotionally controlling and harmful, and when she met Ryan, his behavior felt like something she already knew how to survive. She had been shaped by that pattern long before she had language for what it was. The jury listened to every word. Then Ryan stood up from the defense table. He shouted across the courtroom that Pam was a black-hearted, evil woman. He said he could not believe the things she was saying about him. The outburst was immediate, loud, and completely uncontrolled. Judge John Hulsing had Ryan Weingarten removed from his own trial. He sat outside a closed door in the hallway while the woman who had protected him for 26 years finished her testimony without him in the room. The most revealing testimony came from a man named Daryl Kane, a fellow inmate who had shared a cell block with Ryan while he waited for trial. Kane told the jury that Ryan had spoken openly about what he had done, not with guilt, not with shame, with something that felt closer to satisfaction. Ryan had also talked about Cheryl, his surviving sister, the woman who had spent 25 years publicly campaigning for this case to be reopened, writing letters, speaking to journalists, refusing to let it go cold again. Ryan told Kane, "If I had known she was going to cause me this much trouble, I would have dealt with her a long time ago." And then, Kane testified, Ryan made a slow and deliberate gesture with his hands, miming what he would have done to her. Completely calm while he did it. No agitation. No remorse. Just a man describing a decision he wished he had made. The defense pushed back on every front. They attacked Pam's credibility and called her testimony coerced. They raised the biker gang theory one more time. They floated the idea that Gail had been targeted over financial irregularities at her workplace, suggesting a company document had been present at the crime scene and removed before police could examine it. The company representative who testified said flatly, "No document was requested, no document was taken." The prosecution responded to the workplace theory in open court and called it, without hesitation, "Little Green Men from Mars stuff." 3 weeks of testimony, 60 witnesses. A defendant was removed from his own trial for shouting at his wife. The defense was resting on theories that the prosecution had just publicly dismissed. And then Ryan Weingarten asked to take the stand in his own defense. The courtroom went still in a particular way, because everyone in that room understood what was about to happen. They were about to watch a man who had spent 26 years carefully managing the story around him try to manage it one final time in front of a jury that had already heard everything. Ryan Weingarten took the stand in his own defense, and Pam was already gone. She had left the courtroom before he sat down. She had testified. She had said every word that needed to be said. She had no interest in watching him stand in front of a jury and deny it. The seat where she had been sitting was empty, and Ryan, when he looked toward it, would have seen nothing but an absence. He could not hold himself together from the first moment. He went off on tangents that had nothing to do with the questions asked. Judge Hulsing redirected him, then redirected him again. Ryan accused the detectives of inventing evidence against him. He claimed Pam had been manipulated into everything she said. He suggested she was doing this to secure grounds for divorce. He cried. At one point, he looked up at the ceiling of the courtroom and addressed God directly, out loud, in the middle of his own testimony, as though he believed that would help. He was not a man mounting a legal defense. He was a man performing innocence for an audience that had already sat through 60 witnesses describing exactly who he was. Then the prosecutor asked him about Gail. Under oath in open court, Ryan admitted it. He described 3 incidents involving his sister. The first, he said, happened when he was 12 and Gail was 9. He called all of it, collectively, just kids' play. He moved through the second incident quickly. Then he described the third and final one. He was 15, Gail was 12, and he added a detail that he appeared to believe would help him, a single sentence, delivered calmly, as if it settled something. The courtroom went completely still. The prosecutor let the silence settle, then began taking Ryan's own words apart, piece by piece. When Ryan was 15 and Gail was 12, she was a child. When he was 12 and she was 9, she was a child. There is no legal or moral framework in which a 9-year-old can agree to anything with a 12-year-old sibling. And Ryan's use of the word consensual was not a defense. It was a confession repackaged in language he had spent years perfecting. Crystal Villain had testified before this same jury that Ryan admitted to her, unprompted, in a park, while crying days after the attack, that the last time it happened, Gail had said no, and he had not stopped. Ryan's version called it mutual. Crystal's account, given years before any trial existed and with no reason to fabricate, said something completely different. And the math Ryan kept trying to construct to support his own story kept collapsing. He said the incidents happened at specific ages, but the ages he cited didn't add up with the known age gap between him and his sister. He couldn't keep his own timeline consistent across a single afternoon on the stand. He also told the jury he had no reason to want Gail silenced. He said he wouldn't have cared if she had told Rick everything. But Pam had already testified that Ryan explicitly said he did it because he was afraid of exactly that. And Crystal had already testified that Rick had seen the way Ryan looked at Gail on that boat trip, and Ryan had known Rick understood. 2 women, 2 separate conversations, years apart. Both are pointing to the same thing against one man whose account matched neither. March 28, 2014. The jury went out. 4 hours later, they came back. 4 hours for a case that had taken 26 years to reach a courtroom. Guilty, 2 counts of first-degree murder. As the verdict was read aloud, Ryan turned toward the section of the courtroom where Pam had been sitting earlier in the trial. Her seat was empty. He looked at it anyway, and then quietly, almost imperceptibly, he mouthed her name, not with rage, not with accusation. Just her name, as if some part of him still could not fully process that the one person he had controlled for 26 years, the one person he had trusted to hold the story together, was the reason the story had finally ended. Outside the courthouse, Rick's brother Bud Brink spoke to reporters. He said, "One of them, my brother. I think he knew who took his life. I don't think my sister-in-law knew, because I don't think she was awake, but I think my brother looked him in the eyes, and that is a haunting thought. And today, we have justice for that." Rick Brink had lowered his car window for a man he trusted. He had seen the face of the person who was about to take his life. Gail had been asleep. She never saw it coming. Bud said, and he meant it, that in a strange and painful way, he found something like peace in knowing his sister had been spared that moment. April 21st, 2014. Sentencing. Ryan was given the opportunity to speak before the sentence was delivered. He used it for over an hour. He called Judge John Hulsing a liar, directly to his face in open court. "You're lying right now. You are flat out lying." He said the detectives had mentally taken advantage of his wife and forced words into her mouth. He invoked God. He said, "There's a good chance if they had caught the real person, I might have. I won't say it, but I would have gone after whoever took my sister." He could not stop talking. He could not stop performing. Even now, with the verdict behind him and the sentence coming, the story still had to be managed. Judge Hulsing reached his limit. He looked at Ryan and said, "Do I need to bind and silence you, sir? Because if that is what is necessary, that is exactly what will happen. But you're going to sit here, and you're going to listen." Ryan fell quiet. The judge looked at him steadily and said, "This was a brutal execution. You are a brutal, cold-blooded individual. 2 life sentences. No possibility of parole. Ryan Wingardin will die in prison." That same month, Pam filed for divorce. 1 week after the verdict, Detective Venus Repper began boxing up 2 years of case materials. She said, "It's been a very emotional case. It's about these two people who were taken. It's justice for Rick and Gail. We did our job." Her partner, Detective Dave Blakely, who had promised himself years earlier that he would not retire until this case was closed, walked out of the Ottawa County Sheriff's Department for the final time that spring. The Brink case was the last case he ever worked. He had kept his word. Ryan appealed 3 times: the Michigan Court of Appeals, the Michigan Supreme Court, a federal petition under the name Wingarden v. Chapman. Every single appeal was denied. He sits today in Saginaw Correctional Facility at Security Level 4. He will die there. Gail's father, Wendell, had passed away in 2005, 9 years before the verdict. He never knew who took his daughter's life. Their mother, Dorothea, lived to see it. She turned 90 in June 2021 and passed away that October, having carried the truth for 7 years. Outside the courthouse in 2014, she had quietly told an investigator, "I don't care what you say, you're wrong." She never stopped believing her son was innocent. That belief was its own kind of grief, a mother who lost her daughter and then lost her son to the same truth. On the same November night in 1987, she held both losses until she couldn't hold anything anymore. Cheryl Murphy stood outside the courthouse after the verdict and said, "We're done. We finally got him." Later, she went to Gail's grave. She stood there alone and said the words that had taken 27 years to be able to say. "It's over. You can rest now." Rick and Gail Brink were 28 and 22 years old, 18 months married, planning a nursery in a house they were renovating room by room, laughing at their mistakes, filming the progress on a camcorder because they wanted to remember all of it. They were planning a life. They were in the middle of building it. What defines them is not how that building stopped. It is what the footage shows. Gail in that unfinished house, covered in renovation dust, turning toward the camera, her husband holding and waving, smiling at the man she knew would be beside her for the rest of her life. For a brief and beautiful season, everything they had ever dreamed of was exactly what they had.